Did you know that mammoths weren't really that big in real life? The most famous subspecies, the woolly mammoth, grew up to 11 feet tall at the shoulder, which is only roughly as big as a modern African elephant. The steppe mammoth was in fact the largest in the family and grew to up to 15 feet tall.
Now that's big, sure, but it's hardly comparable to a Warhammer Chaos Mammoth. From the concept art, which you can see here, we can estimate their height at, I'd say, 20 to 24 feet at the shoulder. And making a model this big comes with a lot of challenges, says project art director Greg Alston.
The problem is it was the height though, because we are limited, because we have got constraints that we've got to go through kind of gates and things, and so the mammoth is pretty much on the limit on height. So think of those bridges as height restrictions. Anything above there, it was like, but the giant riding mammoth, it would just kind of flip.
Well, even width, because you see some of those units in the campaign map as well. So you've got to think if they're too wide, they're going to start clipping with buildings and trees and marrying. So you've got to take that kind of square foot space into consideration. Well, cubic foot space is a consideration for everything.
So what sorts of things can go wrong if a unit model is higher than its limit?
It will just clip through the gate. So you've got the gates of kind of the city walls, and go through, and it'll just start clipping there. So we've got those kind of constraints and things, and also it's going up kind of hills and things. We've got different kind of terrains or different angles and things. And then you've got legs that won't properly be on the, grounded on the ground and things. So there's all those things. The bigger you make it, then you've got those. Not so bad. Well, actually, even the biped, the giant, we had the same issues with kind of scale issues there. So it was limited to the height.
Chaos Mammoths never got official rules in the Warhammer Fantasy tabletop game, but unlike a few units Creative Assembly had to invent for Bretonnia, such as Royal Hippogriff Knights and Foot Squires, they did get a semi-official miniature from Forge World, which makes outsized or specialist models for the Warhammer universe. As you can see, the Total War Mammoth is explicitly based on the Forge World one, so that's where it gets its size. And thank goodness for that, because as lead character artist Baj Singh explains, its size is also the reason Norskans don't have an even more powerful unit to field.
My only regret is we never got the giant riding the mammoth.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a great unit type.
That's right. Creative Assembly were once considering giant cavalry, but they got cut because they couldn't fit under city gates. Fitting with geography takes many forms though, of which height and width are only the most obvious. Consider also traversal. One of the things that strikes me most about the mammoth is the sense of weight and power in their strides. That's achieved in the way that they're animated.
So animation, again, it's as you reference an elephant, and obviously we've done elephants in the kind of Rome. So we had that as a good starting point, but basically these are kind of war mammoths are kind of elephants on acid, I suppose. They're kind of really kind of, you want to get that kind of big weight, the weight and sense of so we had to spend a lot of time just looking at heavy animals, looking at the dinosaurs, and but you get that reference, and it's just making that kind of slow sense of kind of weight and everything. So it's just really slowed down the animation, really emphasised the weight.
But there is an issue here. If a mammoth takes 5 minutes to plant its foot, no doubt it's going to appear weighty and impressive, but it's also going to be a useless addition to your army. Furry cannonball practice at best. So good interdepartmental communication with designers is crucial to make sure valuable dev time isn't wasted making walk cycles that don't fit with the unit's in-game speed.
I mean, it's going to make, as Lee mentioned, it's gameplay. We really are kind of, so you want to get that sense of weight, but obviously if it gets too slow as fast, it has a big implications. But the great thing is, it's because of its size, its strides are, it does take, we get that sense of weight because it takes those long strides, but it just takes it slower. So it's lots of to and fro between the designers and the kind of animators. They'll say it needs to move at this speed, and then we'll go, okay, and then that's too slow or too fast or whatever. We'll go from there.
Now, if you've been playing games for a while, you've probably spotted a few fudges around this point. There's Michael Jackson syndrome, where a model's foot will be firmly planted, but it'll still be moving, as if moonwalking forwards. And of course, there's also Benny Hill syndrome, where a model's walk animation is artificially sped up. That's not how you make a scary mammoth. But there's a lot more that goes into the simple act of determining how quickly a unit should be able to put one foot in front of another. There may be a late-minute buff or nerf from design, and of course there are game states to consider. Obviously the Mammoth needs a walk and a charge cycle, and should it move slower when fatigued as well? How about when under the effects of a spell, or when walking up or down a hill, or through water, or through trees? And how's it going to turn? As lead technical animator Lee Dunham explains, it's all a question of priorities.
You still need to make sure that you don't produce 10 or 15 different walk cycles of different speeds just to get the foot planting right, because of the amount of tweaks that may be applied to that unit that's going to change how fast it may walk. So you try and make sure that you do the fewest animations to cover the widest range, so then you're not spending half of your animation schedule budget on just doing walk cycles for characters, you know, because then there'd be no fun, there'd be no match combat.
So after these compromises, how many walk cycles does a Mammoth have?
So at the moment, I think it's got a walk and it's got a run and it's got a charge, so it's 3. Because we've got so many different characters, I mean, ideally we'd have liked to have had a lot more gears, because essentially it's like a car. You want to have like a slow walk, medium walk, and then you got a corresponding walks for depending on all the different kind of factors, as Lee mentioned. If it's going up a hill, it then needs to start walking slower. If it's going down, then it's going to have to go faster, or it might have a debuff or a buff or whatever. So you've got all these modifiers, so you've got all these animations, and you might have it bang on the design, but then you've got all these other modifiers applied on the actual speed, and it's like, okay.
So I think with something like the Mammoth, it's a bit easier to manage because they're generally quite slow anyway. I think with something like with a human, there's a lot more variation in there because a lot more, and they're a lot smaller as well. But with Mammoth, I think it's just testing it out. I think it's just you do the animations, you play around, and if it doesn't necessarily work, then we'll speak to programmers and we'll work or design first. And we'll speak to programmers to try and like, is there anything we can do when it comes down to blending between animations to make sure that the transition between a walk and a run still retains some foot planting. Things like that to try and reduce the amount of times there is foot sliding. And we're not always going to get it perfect. If we had a lot more time to be able to add this animation, but even it might not necessarily come down to time as well, right? Because the more animations you produce, the more data you have. The more data you have, the minimum requirements for the game goes up, because you need then more memory allocated to the animation. So that's another thing we need to balance. When it comes down to the scheduling for animation or for art, it's also then how much can we actually fit in the game and actually get it to run.
After a unit charges into battle, of course, then comes all the killing, and obviously all units have attack and death animations. But when something as big and dramatic as a Mammoth hits combat, Creative Assembly know this is when we're all hitting K to turn off the HUD and zooming in to watch the fun.
So it's normally the larger characters. So one of the things we identified straight away was like large versus small. Is that something you see all the time? Because we got like lots of infantry, and especially from a distance, you don't tend to see. It's just about reading. You don't actually see those animations. So you spend all this time sometimes doing all these matchups with smaller creatures versus small, and you don't see it. Where really, when you want to put the effort of doing a kind of match combat, you really want to signal to the player, look at this cool animation. It's essentially waving to the kind of player. And so like the big versus small, I've got all the matchups. So every kind of giant monster should have a matched up between an infantry, and so most infantry will have a victim animation against that kind of giant character.
Apart from size, there's one more feature the Mammoth has in abundance that makes it a fearsome challenge for any digital artist, and that's its fur.
When you brought up Mammoth, that was the first thing I thought. The bane of an artist is hair and fur. So the way we approach the fur is we have one triangle, which is basically half a polygon, and we assign a bit of fur to that. Then we take that, duplicate it, and we do that about 6,000 times. And I think in the end there's about 7,000 of them on the character, where we just manually moved them around and made sure they fit. Because at that scale we didn't need to worry about making them too dense in terms of the modelling side. For animations, it's like they're so small that you can just assign them to different bones very quickly and not worry about them intersecting too much, because it's just going to give the illusion of this big, like, shaggy creature.
7,000 triangles. 7,000 manually moved around a model. I hope you bring that up the next time anyone complains about their hair being hard to manage. Anyway, we hope you learned a little something about the painstaking effort that went into creating the Norskin's centerpiece unit in Total War Warhammer. And if not, that you'll at least be thankful you don't have to fight giants riding mammoths. Give us a like for gratitude and subscribe for plenty more PC gaming and Total War content. We've actually got several more of these little featurettes coming up on the channel soon, so keep your eye of terror, yes I know that's 40k shut up, firmly fixed on PCGamesN. Until next time, thanks very much for watching, and take care.